Hello and welcome to our members and guests for our public webinar series, Lunch and Learn. Today we are really pleased to launch the final report in our Future of Work project. Committee for Perth conducts its work on Whadjuk Noongar country, and I pay my respects to elders past and present and acknowledge them as the traditional owners of the land. I also acknowledge any other Aboriginal people joining us today. I've got quite a few slides to get through. I can't give you all of the detail on each of the slides, but what I aim to do is give you a summary of the report and spend some time on the scenarios that we have, the key findings, and importantly, the recommendations. So let's get underway. For those of you who don't know about the Committee for Perth, and we've got many of our members joining today, but also a number of other stakeholders, we're WA's leading independent think tank. We take an evidence-based and solutions-focused approach, and we have a track record of driving structural and cultural change to enrich Greater Perth's reputation as a place to live, work, study, invest and visit. We've produced an enormous evidence base over our 15 years in operation, and more than 140 pieces of research is what the Future of Work report will be joining. What's pleasing is that we have over 100 members covering more than 40 sectors in our economy, and they've played a very active participatory role in doing this project. The characteristics of the Committee for Perth are that we're independent, we're apolitical, as I said, evidence-based and solutions-focused, we're highly collaborative, frank and fearless, and I think on this occasion with the Future of Work report, we've been very bold. So for those of you who haven't been on this journey over the last 12 months, the aims of the Future of Work project were to create a comprehensive understanding of how technology and automation combined with relevant global and workforce megatrends are shaping the future of work. We believe that the report will help people, government and businesses to understand the opportunities available to them and to guide Western Australia into a leadership position. This project has been undertaken with a comprehensive and collaborative process, starting with very large-scale community and business surveys, a number of fact-based bulletins, which I'll show you the covers of in a minute. And Gemma Davis has been the author of many of these, along with researchers at the University of Western Australia and at Edith Cowan University. We've undertaken additional research, some benchmarking. We've had member feedback, many sessions over lunch and workshops where we've socialised the report, its findings and recommendations. And the first full draft underwent expert review. So can I give my thanks to Professor Matthew Tonts, who's the convener of the Fact-Based Project, Emeritus Professor Gary Martin from the Institute of Management of WA, and East Coast-based futurist Rose Herzig. Their feedback was very important. So the report and its key findings are driven by evidence, as you would expect from an organisation like us. A core strength has been the consistency between the research and community and Committee for Perth consultation findings. However, this has been our most dynamic project. There's been volatility, uncertainty and rapid advancement as we've been shaping this report and particularly the final recommendations. So you'll see a number of fact-based bulletins. There was between 70 to 76 fact-based bulletins are undertaken, the Future of Work surveys, and as I said, the consultation workshops. In the report, there are a number of sections. I'm going to share most of the chapters with you, but not all in the interests of time. So we're going to look at advanced technology, global challenges, economic disruption, skilled and educated workforce, flexible and remote work and creative spaces, and equity and adaptability. The learning from history chapter at the end is very important, but I just don't have time to cover it today, so it'll be worthwhile reading that when you have the report to hand. So we believe that the future of work has arrived. We're here in the fourth industrial revolution, where technology, artificial intelligence, robotics, sensors and data is part of the Internet of Everything. And at the same time, there are global megatrends and, of course, the global pandemic. So we've got global economic, demographic, socio-economic, environmental and geopolitical trends, not the least of which are population ageing, labour force change, shifting workforce structure, climate change and urbanisation. Both of these are creating work impacts, workforce impacts and workplace impacts, and we talk about those in the report. In terms of advanced technology, and this is probably one of the greater learnings of the report, over the last 18 months we've been in this great experiment of using so much more technology so that we can stay connected to each other and stay productive. And we believe that Western Australia has the capacity to be a leader. We've got talented people, a stable government, enviable lifestyle and safety, world-leading institutions, infrastructure and resources, and we are an early adopter. But we are hindered by some constraints. We've got lower levels of R&D investment than other states. We're somewhat risk adverse, this sort of sense of being quite conservative. We have a regulatory lag and we tend to be less collaborative, more parochial, I suppose. So one of the key findings is that advanced breakthrough technology is transforming economies, and Western Australia really needs to be at the forefront of that, and we believe the recommendations will position us in that way. Technology, up until now, I think we've seen as an enabler, something that is a tool of the trade, something we're working with as part of our daily lives. But the report also finds it can be a displacer. So the Future of Work survey that we conducted for this project was done by Ipsos, and it included people from all parts of Western Australia. Key findings are that 68% of workers believe that technology has made it faster for them to complete routine tasks. 56% of respondents thought that technology helps them to perform complex tasks. 43% of workers said technology had enabled them to work remotely or from home. 30% of workers reported that technology had made their jobs safer. 22% said they were concerned that technology would displace their jobs. And 58% believed that technology would completely change their job tasks. So we're alert to both the opportunities and the challenges. In terms of technological adoption, it's multi-speed. It's not that one wave of change is coming, we get used to that and adopt it in large scale and then move on to the next. So you can just see the wave of change between computerisation and then the digitisation and automation that we're currently going through. Earlier in the project, Gemma was able to pull together a number of sources to talk really to us about what were the industries that were most susceptible to automation and technological disruption. And first and second on the bar chart on the left is manufacturing and then transport. And the industries seem to be least susceptible to technological disruption are education and health. And we had identified those in other reports as being the big growth sectors. So I suppose the biggest surprise to me was just the role that automation is going to play. And coming back to the survey, 49% of WA businesses expect to implement AI over the coming decade and expect to deploy robotics. And so you can just see the high percentage there of the multiple forms of technology that are likely to be implemented over just a decade. This is probably the prettiest slide in our presentation today, certainly the prettiest page in the report. It's probably one of the more alarming. Gemma asked an app to talk about the future of work. It produced 3 paragraphs. She didn't tell me what the 3 paragraphs were. And when the report came to me in draft form, I read the chapter and I couldn't identify which were written by AI. Gemma has been working and producing quality work for me for 18 years. And the fact that I couldn't pick it out in a couple of pages of writing just goes to show how clever it is. So she asked a very simple question. What is AI, and how can AI be applied? And as I said, 3 very intelligent, insightful paragraphs were produced. So for those of us who are knowledge workers and feel that it'll only be low-skilled workers that will face automation and a robot could replace them. This just goes to show how vulnerable we are as well. Coming to global challenges, I talked at the front of the presentation about all of the challenges, the global changes and headwinds afoot. So in the Future of Work survey, 37% of WA businesses said that there was going to be a shift towards anti-global sentiment, which would be detrimental to business, and 34% were concerned about the potential negative impacts of climate change. So, and these forces that are afoot that are very much externalities to the West Australian economy. There was a really strong desire amongst our members that Western Australia could take a leadership position, and there was a real sense of urgency about that. So some of the quotes that came out of those sessions I think are insightful. We need to diversify our economy and export markets. Let's take the opportunities provided by COVID-19 and run with it. There's a huge appetite for investment in renewable energy and climate adaptation. Tap into it. WA has the know-how to be a climate change and renewable energy leader. Let's use it. In terms of economic disruption, this next slide is incredibly busy. The only number you really need to focus on is in the West Australian column, second from the top, when we look at mining. And the location quotient for mining in Western Australia shows that we are much more dependent and reliant on mining than any other state is on any of its other sectors. So no surprise to a West Australian audience, I'm sure. Gemma's gone further to talk about how we need to diversify, and I think we're all in fierce agreement about that. But what she's done by sector is identified some of the disruptors. And in construction, this sense of localism and technology, the same for retail trade. When it comes to accommodation and food services, it's the border closures that we've currently got, as well as technology, and then working up the other way, healthcare and social assistance. It'll be COVID, technology, population ageing and skills shortages, education and training will face anti-globalisation, of course, the border restrictions, and technology, professional, scientific and technical services are the same, and mining, of course. The lion's share of the recommendations in the report come to a skilled and educated workforce. It's something that we'll be turning our attention to in our next project, and I'll talk about that at the end of this presentation. So skilled people are WA's most valuable resource, but are diminishing in supply. So prior to the pandemic, 49% of businesses experienced challenges of accessing the skilled workers they needed for their sector, for their organisation. During the pandemic, and we found this in our survey, 70% of businesses said that the skills they needed are in short supply. 60% said that the skills they needed were not available in WA, and 35% said they were not attainable Australia-wide. That is a challenge. So the competition for economic prosperity in the future will not be won by places with the best technology. It'll be won by the places with the best, most diverse and technology-savvy people. Coming on to Perth's human capital, our advantage has been declining, and there's a risk that we could become a less competitive location given the percentages that I just shared with you then. In a previous bulletin, we looked at human resource. Could I have the next slide, please? We looked at human capital, and what concerned us was the high concentrations in our eastern suburbs of people with lower levels of human capital than those in a concentration, particularly in the inner ring suburbs and off to the northwestern coastal areas. We believe that education reform is critical to the future. And we mean reform at all levels, from kindergarten through to year 12 in the vocational and the tertiary sectors. What a number of members kind of reiterated in our sessions, I think, are well captured in these two quotes. Change is moving faster than the education system. Education needs to be iterative and lifelong. We need to focus on teaching people the right skills. And if we look at the pictures on the right, they illustrate the growth professions between 2010 and 2020, so probably capturing that pre-COVID era well. But at the highest percentage, there was a 84% growth in ICT network and support professionals, 60% growth in health professionals, 51% in database system administration and ICT security specialists, 37% in design, engineering, science and transport professionals, and 34% in business and systems analysts and programmers. We believe that retraining will have to be lifelong, keeping skills at the forefront throughout your career. And when we asked people in the survey, so who's expected to pay for this retraining, the resounding response was employers. And that is about, if you're changing my job in any way, technology is being utilised, you have to retrain me on that technology. That means that you have to give me time off and pay for my course, as well as give me time off to prepare for the course and then do the potential exams or qualifications, other qualifications that are required at the end. So a very costly experience. We also make a particular recommendation in the report, though, that people themselves, individuals, must keep up with their own retraining and be very aware of where technology is heading. So attracting a diverse global workforce will provide a competitive edge for Western Australia. We've certainly been a skills importing jurisdiction over many decades. Attracting global talent to fill jobs and increasing labour force participation amongst underrepresented groups in the workforce will be important to fill future skill gaps. We're really worried about people being left behind, and we certainly call out the inequity in the report. This, of course, will mean how do we re-enter the country and the world with the border restrictions that we've currently got, and make sure that we have a comparative advantage into the future. Coming to the workplace, it's going to be different to the place that we left in March last year. So according to the Future of Work survey, 50% of WA's workforce work from home for at least part of the working week during COVID restrictions. And of course, that excluded people like essential and frontline workers who obviously had to go to their place of work. 41% of workers continued to work from home when restrictions eased, and EY came out with a very insightful report that said you must earn the commute. And 66% of WA businesses are planning to shift to a more flexible employment to adapt to global change. So the Future of Work socialisation session participants stressed that irrespective of office location, there needs to be a design where people want to be. And they were defined as spaces that are sociable, flexible, technologically enabled, and deliver access to peer collaboration, learning and mentoring opportunities. And certainly young people reported that the best place for them to learn is actually in the office, not only learning from their peers and superiors, but also by observing them, which is incredibly hard to do over Zoom. This next slide shows the 5 models that one of our member companies, Hassel, has come up with. So as it was, everyone returning to the office 5 days a week, business as usual, and at the other end, no office. They're saying, well, the office could be completely disbanded and everybody could be working at home. But as in typical in scenario planning, it's often the hybrid models that are likely to emerge. What we're hearing from our members is there will be a blend of some at home and some at work, and companies are really struggling to make policies that are not too restrictive and give people the flexibility they are desiring, but also a degree of fairness. Our colleagues at Edith Cowan University produced the last fact-based bulletin for us in this project. They determined that working from home can be challenging. In the first instance of lockdown, I think we went home, we were happy to be safe and secure in our own little bubbles, and we got on with the job, and certainly productivity did not decrease, or certainly by our members reporting. But over the time, and certainly we've seen this with our East Coast colleagues, there were some task-related stresses, so longer hours, increased workload, additional tasks leading to overwork. Family-related challenges of the work and home interface, people saying, well, a 2-second commute from my office to the kitchen is not long enough for me to recalibrate. Conflicts between work and life, particularly if people were homeschooling, and concerns very much emerged over the last wee while about personal and family wellbeing. In terms of the physical work environment, there were poor physical working conditions. I can attest to that, having worked from my dining room table. People had a sense of isolation as well and not being included, and a number of companies encouraged online, just collaborative sessions, team building, team connection to overcome that. There were social and organisational factors, so concerns about the level of autonomy that people had, and communication and information provision. And we did hear very early on in the pandemic that workers wanted to hear any amount of information rather than be kept in the dark. So even if leaders didn't have answers, they certainly wanted to hear that you didn't have answers. Technological issues, people saying techno stress, I'm just so over Zoom, I'm just so over looking at the screen. Being constantly connected, never switching off. And of course, if you had a technical problem, who did you call? You had to try and muddle through yourself. And the psychosocial factors of burnout and fatigue and mental stress and isolation. I said to you earlier in the presentation, we had spent quite a bit of time talking about equity and adaptability. And one of the concerns with Industry 4.0 in this internet of everything, that it will be transformative, but some people could be left behind. So low-skilled and older workers are least likely to view technological advancements as a threat to their employment, but we believe they are the most at risk. Participants in our socialisation sessions expressed concern about the potential for technological change and advancements to widen the gap in education and employment, particularly for Indigenous communities. And there's a strongly held view that organisations, institutions and the state government need to ensure that they are not left behind. So let me get you into the scenarios and the recommendations in the report. So we've made 5 key findings and produced 2 contrasting scenarios, one in which WA leads and the other in which WA lags. So what I'm going to do is read out each of the key findings, and Rosa in our team has been good enough to find one word to describe the scenarios that are much more fulsome in the report. So key finding 1 is that places and organisations at the forefront of change as developers of breakthrough technology, like Western Australia is, have the most to gain in the future economy. But currently WA is heavily reliant on the mining and resources sector and has not leveraged this specialisation or invested in innovation or developing economic opportunities for the future outside of that industry. So in the WA lags, we would be described as conservative, and taking a leadership position, we would be described as innovative. Key finding 2, it's time for Australia and WA to take a leadership role in tackling global climate challenges. In the lagging position, we would be passive, business as usual, but in the leadership position, we would be proactive. Key finding 3, skilled, educated and creative people will be the most valuable future resource, yet are becoming increasingly difficult to access. We're not growing enough of our own, and we're probably not likely to be able to import the ones that we need. In a laggard position, we'd be considered old-fashioned, but in a leadership position, visionary. Key finding 4, new technology presents big opportunities for organisations and workers, but the benefits will not be equally shared if we don't do things to address it. Lagging, we'd be seen as restrictive, and leading, we'd be seen as inclusive. Key finding 5, flexible and remote work are opportunities to heighten employer competitiveness, Yet these changes need to be fully managed to promote worker wellbeing, generate new jobs within WA and ensure the vibrancy and accessibility of city centres so that we can continue to benefit from them as places of creativity, collaboration and innovation. So in a laggard position, exclusive, closed off, and in a leadership position, interactive and open. Now, the next two slides contain the 22 recommendations, and I understand they are very busy slides. So I thought I would just spend some time calling out the ones that I believe are the key ones, and they are for government, institutions, organisations and individuals. So we all have a role to play. This is not a report directed exclusively at one over the other. So in terms of research and development, recommendation 1 says, establish Australia's National R&D hub for the development of AI for agriculture, mining, fisheries, forestry and environmental management within Greater Perth. So that's really taking that leadership position, having a national centre of excellence. We're also talking about having collaborative centres of excellence of hubs of R&D. That's recommendation number 2. So WA has the capacity to build competitive advantage such in the areas of health, education, environmental management, renewable energy, METS, space and agri-tech, leveraging off strengths that we already have and manoeuvring them into other sectors. And recommendation 3 talks directly to the fact that state government needs to increase its levels of investment, particularly make it comparable to that of other states. We are really lagging in that area. In terms of climate change, recommendation 5 says to government, update your state climate policy to be the leading and most progressive in the country. Skills shortages and development, as I suggested before, are where the lion's share of the recommendations sit, and just calling out a number of those, starting with the comprehensive reform of the education system that we're calling for. We're saying that there are ways in which we can increase human capital and equip our students as future workers. We need to incentivise training in occupations at recommendation number 8, where there is a current or predicted skills shortage. So really honing in on where we have a need. Recommendation 9, review the rates of pay for apprentices and other workforce trainees to encourage training and skill development. As you would know, for those of you who have been under those pay regimes, they're pretty lowly paid. Recommendation number 10, encourage more people to enrol in higher education, including vocational, technical and tertiary education through funding and assistance programs. And critical at recommendation number 12, we believe that organisations and sectors need to collaborate with education institutions and other organisations and peer groups to develop training and education programs that will deliver the future skills needed. So very much a collaborative effort so that the right training is happening for the right people. Moving on to recommendation 14, we believe that individuals need to stay up to date with emerging technologies and very much engage with networking in their industries and within their peer groups so that they're at the forefront of that knowledge. In terms of equity, recommendation 15 says, incentivise training and education for minority groups, for people from low socioeconomic backgrounds and for people in occupations at risk of technological disruption. Recommendation 17, provide equitable access to information and communications technology infrastructure and invest in eliminating the education, work and digital divide, particularly for Indigenous communities. I was very pleased to see a number of recommendations in the draft Infrastructure WA 20-year strategy seeking to address just that. In terms of legislation and regulation, recommendation number 20 says, review regulations to identify and address barriers to the implementation of new or existing technologies that will improve prosperity and livability. Working from anywhere, the last of the final two recommendations, recommendation 21, prepare workplace policies that ensure equitable access to flexible, agile and remote work for all people, maximise worker wellbeing and address issues such as requirements for face-to-face learning, mentoring and collaboration, a very important in-person opportunity. And our final recommendation, rethink the role of the office space and the dispersal of workers and ensure that centralised offices are inviting, sociable and designed to foster collaboration and innovation. The City of Perth and the WA Government need to continue to invest in improving Perth City Centre amenities and experiences accordingly. We're getting to the final few slides, so bear with me. In summary, global headwinds, technology and the pandemic have accelerated rates of change that were already afoot. As a result, we believe that there is no going back to business as usual, and work, the workplace and the workforce will undergo a period of recalibration. Industry 4.0 has the potential to be transformative. We could be more productive with a less environmental footprint. But as a result, some parts of our community may be left behind and we need to ensure that they're not. Technology, previously being used as an enabler, a friend, may become a displacer, a foe. As a result, people will need to commit to lifelong learning and the education sector will have to adjust accordingly. Organisations and their leaders are struggling to develop fair and equitable policies that meet the needs of their entire workforce. And as a result, competitive forces are at play. Working from home has been a catalyst for localism. As a result, city centres are dying from a lack of critical mass, yet suburban centres are flourishing. My disclaimer, we're in the midst of a global pandemic. As a result, the long-term impacts cannot be fully understood, but we've contemplated all that we possibly can, looking at academic research, undertaking surveys, and certainly listening to our members. The Future of Work project was paid for by each of our members through their annual membership contribution, but projects of this scale and size are expensive. And so additional funding was needed, and our core funding partner, BHP, came on board very early and allowed us to get underway quickly. We've had supporting funders, Brookfield Property, Pawsey, the City of Stirling, Water Corporation, the Department of Jobs, Tourism, Science and Innovation, Wesfarmers and Hassel, and I thank each of them for the contribution they made, not only financially but intellectually, having members of their executive team on our steering committee. Our members came to many sessions and there is a full dedication to you in the back of the report, but I also want to acknowledge my team. The researchers, led by Gemma Davis and also from UWA and ECU, my team in here, Rosa, Holly and Bianca, and Tanani Creative, who have produced for the first time for us a report which we believe is really beautiful to look at as well as insightful to read. In support of our report, BHP's Regina Steen, who was the Project Steering Committee Chair and is Head of Human Resources at BHP WA's Iron Ore, says, the report reveals the importance of planning and implementation of new technologies within human resource departments to support workers in the transition to the future of work. In line with the report's recommendations, it's crucial that organisations and sectors collaborate with educational institutions to develop training and education programs that will deliver the future skills needed. And we really concur with Reg's view. Business Council of Australia have also come out in support of the Future of Work report. Jennifer Westacott, their CEO, has provided not only commentary for today's presentation, but also in the media release that went out today. They've just undertaken a large-scale piece of work, living on borrowed time. They've come at it from quite a different perspective, yet there's so much alignment between the recommendations in their report and ours. So Jennifer says, despite 28 years of economic growth and our success managing the economy through the COVID pandemic, we're currently facing an economic equation that doesn't stack up. The world is changing around us. Australia finds itself in the crosshairs of several major shifts, including the rise of Asia, technological and digital advances, and the global adoption of green energy sources. She goes on to say, applying the recommendations from Future of Work will support the pressing need to raise our productivity and performance. To put this into perspective, achieving a 1% increase in productivity growth a year through adopting strategies like those recommended in the report would deliver an extra $10,000 in average incomes for Western Australians over a decade. So you can see there's productivity benefits, but there's also personal dividends as well. So our website will also be updated, but it's got all of the Future of Work inputs up until now. Please take the time to read the Future of Work report. It outlines significant opportunities for WA to lead the nation in the future of work. Thank you.